Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Perligo Ponders, in which I respond to your comments, questions, and theories about my own comments, questions, and theories related to the lore and music of 21 Pilots. As always, if you would like your own comment to be featured in the next episode, simply comment something interesting below, a question you have, a theory you have, or just a general comment. Feel free to flag it as Perligo Ponders if you would like, but I don't just pull comments with that flag. Let's get into it. Our first comment today comes from Lucci Says Hi. One of my biggest questions is concerning the Clancy mask. Where did it come from, and what significance did it hold? There is the factor of having strong brand imagery, and my personal theory of it replacing the ski masks, as that might be too scary for his daughters. But it's kind of odd how it appears in Overcompensate, and then is literally thrown to the side in Paladin Strait. Similar question for Jumpsuit. Why is he wearing the jacket with the yellow tape before he was taught their colors in Levitate? My theory is that he found it in the back of the Heavy Dirty Soul car, why was it there, and has heard of the legends of the Banditos, so maybe he was wearing it to try to get their attention. So really this is two questions in one, so I'm going to try to tackle them one at a time. First of all, the Clancy mask. Why is it introduced in the Clancy era, especially because, as they point out, it has a pretty limited run of use, especially when we're looking just at the lore videos. Certainly we see it in something like Next Semester. There may be other music videos of the Clancy music video series, all 14 of those videos, where it appears again and again. Next Semester is the main one that comes to mind that isn't, a lore video, strictly speaking. But if we look at the lore trilogy for Clancy, the Clancy trilogy of lore videos, we have Overcompensate, Navigating, and then Paladin Strait. In Overcompensate, he's wearing the mask for the bulk of that video. In Navigating, he doesn't wear the mask. In fact, at the end, I think he is given the mask by the Torchbearer. Certainly the Torchbearer is pictured bringing the mask to him, but he doesn't wear it for the majority of the video as he's traveling to the Bandito camp. And then, as is mentioned here in Paladin Strait, he does wear the mask for a lot of the video, but then right at the end, at the climax, he tears it off, casts it aside, and we don't really see it used a ton during the Breach era. Now, it does appear in videos like The Contract when he goes into the void, into that sort of subconscious dream state. He does wear it in some of those shots, but not in others. But we don't really see it in City Walls all that much, again, because that takes place after he takes off the mask in Paladin Strait. So what's the point of this mask? Why is it introduced? If it's going to have such a short run, why is it the sort of brand imagery of the Clancy era, the Clancy and Breach era? Is it simply because, as this person suggests, the ski masks would be too scary for his daughters? Maybe, but I think you could say, in fairness, a lot of the other things that they do with the imagery might be too scary for his daughters, regardless of whether or not they're wearing ski masks. Now, perhaps for the sake of a live concert performance, him not wearing a ski mask would be better. Him wearing a Clancy mask is better for his daughters in the audience of that live show. Okay, maybe fair enough. But in terms of the actual imagery of the lore, he doesn't actually wear a ski mask all that much. And then when the Clancy mask is introduced, we've already gotten things like Keons being murdered by knives being stabbed into him in the Outside music video and things like that. There's some quite violent imagery throughout the story. So my inclination is to say they wanted to bring back the masks, but they wanted to do it in a fresh and unique way. Again, they hadn't really used the masks all that much. I'm not saying they hadn't used them at all, because they have. But we see them during the Skilled and Icy era. We see them during the Bandito era as well, or the Trench era, the Bandito tour. During those live performances, they come out at the beginning of the Icy tour wearing ski masks. But I think they just wanted a fresh approach to the mask imagery. So then why this particular mask? Why this design? Well, up until now, we've really seen Clancy running from the bishops. He wears, and we'll get into this in a moment with the second half of the question, the colors of the Banditos, that shade of yellow that is used to distract the bishops, be able to hide and camouflage yourself from the bishops so you can escape. Skilled and Icy, obviously we see him trapped for a lot of that era, and then he's running away, he's escaping. He doesn't have the Bandito colors anymore, but he's still on the run from the bishops. He's not particularly trying to catch their attention. With Clancy, that changes, and that's made clear to us in the I'm Clancy video. He's returning to Dima in order to catch the attention of the bishops, to start a revolution, to, in some ways, burn the system to the ground. Metaphorically, obviously, we'll see he doesn't actually burn Dima to the ground, but he does overtake and conquer Dima and set himself up as the new bishop. And so he's coming back not as someone who's trying to sneak in or hide necessarily, but catch their attention, and make himself known as sort of a rival to Nico, to Blurryface. And so the red in that mask, I think, is introduced to catch their attention. He's wearing red, a color that they know, a color that they will recognize, a color with which the bishops obviously are very familiar. Okay, now to the second half of this question. In Jumpsuit, why is he wearing the colors of the Banditos? Why does he have that jacket on with the tape, the yellow tape, if he doesn't know the colors of the Banditos, if he hasn't been taught their colors yet? This again is a phrase that is given to us in the I Am Clancy video when he's outlining the whole story thus far, the story of the Trench Saga, everything that we've seen before. He describes in Levitate being brought into the Bandito camp and being taught the colors of the Banditos. However, it is worth noting that before that point, he is aware of the Banditos. He does know who they are, and I think there is some pretty good indication that he's aware of what colors to wear to not attract the attention of the bishops and to be able to hide from the bishops, as I was just talking about. That's what yellow, that shade of yellow, is used for in the clothing. So when he's trying to escape the limits of the city, when he tricks Nico into taking him outside, that's what we see in Heavy Dirty Soul. He's driven outside, he creates a fiery diversion, he escapes. At the end of Jumpsuit, we see him getting a jacket out of the trunk of that car, and so I think it's a valid theory that he pre-packed the trunk of the car with that coat. He couldn't wear it in front of Nico because then Nico would know something is up and he's trying to escape. But he brings it so that after creating the fire diversion, he can grab that jacket, run off into the wilderness, and have a better chance of blending in and hiding from the bishops by wearing that, and to the point here, perhaps also attracting the attention of the Banditos by saying, I'm wearing colors that I think are associated with you, even if I don't fully understand everything about your cause. Being taught your colors, I think, is more than just, here's the color yellow that we wear. It's being taught sort of the fundamental elements of this cause, of the Bandito movement, and learning about what it is they believe and what they're fighting for. And so he wears the yellow to attract their attention. We see this works. The Banditos do come to find him, but it's kind of too late. They show up in time to see Nico come and recapture him and bring him back into the city. So hopefully that makes sense. That would be my interpretation of why we see these two different pieces of clothing worn by Clancy throughout the story. Next up, we have a comment from A Loaf of Fox Z6T. Wasn't Dragpath the original one made a long time ago for an EP named Breach that was actually never released? This was just Tyler before any of the other band members. I'm not entirely sure what makes you think that. Certainly, I haven't seen any indication that that is the case. I'd be very interested to know if you know something I don't, and it is the case. That sounds fascinating. But I think what you might be confusing it with is a different EP entitled No Fun Intended that Tyler Joseph wrote before Chris Solly and Nick Thomas joined him and created 21 Pilots in 2009. Dragpath wasn't a track that, to the best of our knowledge, was included in that collection of songs, and certainly from all accounts, Dragpath is a song which was more recently written and composed. So, short answer, no, I don't think this has any connection to No Fun Intended or anything that Tyler Joseph did that predates the 21 Pilots project. I think it's worth noting also that the No Fun Intended EP in a lot of ways isn't what it actually was, right? What we understand as No Fun Intended doesn't seem to actually be what Tyler Joseph wrote as No Fun Intended. In fact, he might not have even named it that at the time. It's basically just what we call the collection of music that predates 21 Pilots, but he didn't necessarily publish it in that collection, from my understanding. But certainly I don't remember there being any mention of an EP called Breach. If, as I conduct more research into that early period of 21 Pilots history, I find anything that indicates that, I will be sure to let you know, because that would be fascinating if true. But I haven't heard any indication of that anywhere. If you have, let me know in the comments, please, because that would be really cool. But again, yeah, Dragpath was named and some initial lyrics given during the Clancy era, and then obviously we see the finished song during the Breach era. Hope that helps. Next up, we have a comment from Adam HC4EC, who writes, anyone else think that the Keons that sacrifices himself is Torchbearer, that sacrificed himself towards the beginning of the cycle? They realized they would have to have someone on the inside for the plan to succeed, like he took the jacket very early in the story. I feel that is why Keons is more understanding and compassionate than the other bishops. Also, doesn't Clancy say in a letter that Keons almost feels familiar? Will win, but not everyone will get out. This is an interesting theory, and I think it's an interesting point that you raise about who Keons is. I myself am inclined to say it cannot be the Torchbearer, because the role that we see the Torchbearer playing in the story is one that transcends time almost, and certainly transcends the cycles through which Clancy has been going. We see this indicated pretty strongly at the end of City Walls, when he says, "That's not Clancy up there anymore," after Clancy becomes the Nova Bishop. "That's not Clancy up there anymore. We have to go find the next Clancy." Indicating that this Torchbearer isn't linked to a particular cycle, but always following each cycle of Clancy. And in fact, the I'm Torchbearer video that we see points to this as well. He's been watching Clancy go through a number of these cycles. What it means for Clancy to go through the cycles is certainly a subject of speculation and debate and theorizing, and has been ever since Breach came out, and well before. There's a lot we still don't really know about that, but it does seem like the Torchbearer is not caught up on that in the same way. He sort of transcends it. The reason I'm saying that is because I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think the Torchbearer could become Keons and still stay as the Torchbearer. There isn't a separate version of the Torchbearer in the same way that we see with Clancy, right? It seems like there are multiple versions of Clancy. He becomes Blurryface, he becomes a bishop, and then a new Clancy sort of springs up to start the next cycle. Torchbearer doesn't work like that. My understanding of who Keons is that he is a past Clancy. He is someone who became a bishop, didn't overthrow Nico or anything like that. He joined the ranks of the bishops. He succumbed to Blurryface's power, but didn't overtake him or become him in that same way that we see in City Walls. And so he becomes Keons. But he's a much more recent Clancy who almost managed to defeat Blurryface and take on the role of Nova Bishop, but didn't quite, and so he became Keons. And so because of that, because he was so close to breaking the cycle, but didn't actually, or so close to overtaking Blurryface and breaching farther than they ever had, like we see in City Walls, he's still a lot closer to the surface, if that makes sense. The Blurryface within him, the darkness within him is not quite as strong as it is for some of the other bishops, which is why he's so compassionate and kind and so willing to help the next Clancy in their mission and help them achieve their aims. And so I think the reason why Keons feels familiar to Clancy is because he's a past Clancy. He's a past version of Clancy. And so there's something almost, he sees himself in him, right? There's something familiar that Clancy doesn't latch onto because it doesn't cross his mind that Keons is a past version of himself. But he feels familiar because of that connection that they have. Now, another way of looking at it could be that the Torchbearer told a Clancy to go sacrifice himself, become a bishop, so they would have someone on the inside. I could see that being the case. I could see how that might work. It's not an impossible theory, but I certainly don't think it is the Torchbearer himself who ever became a bishop. I think that would contradict the very nature of who the Torchbearer is in this story. Next, we have a comment from a Spotify listener who writes, "Do you think that maybe the self-titled album was Nico's Scaled and Icy, or maybe previous cycles didn't have a very musically inclined Clancy, or maybe the whole thing kind of just stayed in Dima until Nico was so old that he just went an antlered Clancy to stay alive, and only the Trench album and failed ending of Heavy Dirty Soul is standard cycle behavior?" This is from Sir Dynamite 757, by the way, who doesn't want to be anonymous anymore. So I might not fully understand the comment here, or the question. Could it be that Self-Titled was Nico's Scaled and Icy? Maybe. I mean, certainly I think Self-Titled could be something that was written by an early Clancy or someone who later became a bishop. I could see that. Scaled and Icy in the sense of it being something that was written while that early Clancy was also in captivity. Maybe. You could see some indication of that throughout that album, perhaps. It's not something that's ever really crossed my mind before, but I'm not going to say it's an impossibility by any means. This idea of a musically inclined Clancy not existing in previous cycles is something that I have seen mentioned before, and I think it's an interesting idea, but I don't know if I agree with it. I think it sort of depends how you look at the albums and the album cycles, but I think the reason why the bishops and Nico asked Clancy to write Scaled and Icy, or made Clancy write Scaled and Icy, and put on that performance is because they knew he was musically inclined and they knew he would be able to put on that performance. And I think that was because they had seen it happen before. I mean, if we look at the Nico and the Niners music video, right, they are in the lore. It isn't just some like weird, moment where music video and Demo world sort of collide in a sort of suspension of belief fantastical way, where we see them putting on that little performance right after the Banditos find Tyler. No, that's something that the bishops themselves hear. The Torchbearer drumming on his drum set sends like sound waves all the way down to where the assembly of the glorious God is taking place, where the rituals of vialism are taking place underground. We see the ripples in the water from that sound wave. So he's played music around the bishops before. The bishops know he knows how to play music, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. And so that's why they make him put on this performance, because music's sort of a part of who Clancy is. So I'm not necessarily inclined to say that only this particular Clancy, or only the Clancy in the Scaled and Icy era, or the Trench Saga, was musically inclined. I think they all were, and that's why we get sort of references to their music throughout a lot of this. And also, I mean, if we think about it, the live stream performance, the propaganda performance, also included other songs from other albums, not just songs from Scaled and Icy. One other point to this comment, Nico was so old that he just went and antlered Clancy to stay alive. I think it's kind of the opposite. I think Nico was so old that he realized his time was up, so he transfers his power to Clancy. And also, as part of that, his darkness, the blurry face within him, right? To Clancy, to that Clancy. And so then Clancy becomes the new bishop and takes on that role. And so that's a moment where, that Clancy dies and is reborn sort of in a sinister way by becoming the new bishop instead of being reborn to something that stands above or over the rest of the bishops. Next, we have a comment from Marco Elias 9692, who writes, I was listening to Goner the other day, and at minute 244 of the song, I think I hear Tyler say something like, "Don't let me clone." What are your thoughts? Or can my ears just be deceiving me? So I went back and listened to this part of the song, and I get what you're saying. It sounds more like "don't let me be clone" than just "don't let me clone." But yes, I understand sort of where you're getting the elf from. The way he pronounces "gone" in that moment does very sound like "glon" or "clone" or something. He just sort of says it weird. And for reference, this is sort of coming right before the drop where everything gets really heavy, gets quiet, and he says, "Don't let me be gone" 4 times, according to the official lyrics. So is there a chance that he snuck in a "don't let me be clone" or a cloned or a clone somewhere in there? Maybe. I don't really think that's what he's saying. Again, he pronounces "gone" quite weirdly in that moment. Then the other 3 times he says it in that little group of saying it 4 times, it sounds perfectly fine. "Don't let me be gone. Don't let me be gone. Don't let me be glown." And then "don't let me be gone," right? Something like that. So my understanding of that would simply just be that he's saying "don't let me be gone," but pronounced it kind of weirdly in the moment of recording that. And they wanted to keep it because of the emotion behind how he was pronouncing it and so on. If he was saying something about cloning, it would obviously relate to something like more for anything like that. But I'm inclined to think that he is just pronouncing it weirdly, unfortunately. It could be interesting if he were to say it, to say "don't let me be clone." But again, "don't let me be clone" is odd. It doesn't quite mean anything. Cloned or a clone might mean more, but "don't let me be clone" in and of itself is a little nonsensical. And the final comment for this episode comes from ABACAXI from Spotify. Do you think 21 Pilots will create a new lore? I hope so. Or any other thing, maybe another style or something? I don't know. What do you think will happen? A lot of different possibilities suggested here or asked about here related to what is the band going to do next after their break in the post-Breach era. I think we're all wondering the same thing, and no one really knows right now, obviously. Will they create a new story or a new lore? I suspect, and I think many others suspect, that at some point they will. It seems to be a pretty integral part of what they like doing with creativity and music. However, if they do that, I don't think it will start with the next album. And there, in fact, might be 2 or 3 albums before they start that again. I don't know. I think they want to explore and experiment with different things. They don't want to just get stuck in a box and in a rut of doing the same thing over and over again. This is something they talked about during the Clancy music video premiere live stream, I think. A song like Lavish, for instance, which seems kind of out of place of their discography in a lot of ways, was something they wanted to do to stop them from being forced into a particular box of here's the style of music they make, here's what they discuss, here's, the topics they cover, here's the stories that they tell. I think they're going to experiment with some different sounds and ways of putting together albums and things like that. So, I mean, even with Breach, we kind of see this. There's some elements in which that album's a bit more experimental than some of their others, or than something that we've seen from them in a while. So I think doing something that, even if it's not a sequel to Trench, which I certainly hope they don't do, or a sequel to the Trench saga, the Dima story, I hope they don't do, but even if it were just another story set in a new world or whatever it may be, I think even doing something so directly like that would seem like they're just following the same sort of pattern that they've set in place already. And I think given what they like to do and how each album they make has its own distinctive sound and style and all that kind of stuff, I suspect that what they do next, either as something that spans multiple albums or even just for the next album, is something that none of us are really going to be able to predict or anticipate. Because at this point, they might not even know what they want to do next. I don't know. They might have some idea. They might have been thinking ever since, I don't know, before Clancy came out. This is what I want to do next, or this is what we want to do next with our music. And so they're going to try to explore that. But again, who knows really what they're going to do. My guess is that whatever they do with the next album definitely will not start a trend that crosses multiple albums, if they even do something like that again. With that being said, thank you for watching. As always, if you'd like your own comment to be featured in the next episode, simply comment something interesting down below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe for more music commentary and analysis.